That's its face. Eyes shut. It's not moving. I'm gonna back up so you can see how big this thing really is. Look at the shoulders, the arms. From head to toe, must be 8-9 feet easy. It's giant.
This grainy video clip showing what appears to be a dead Bigfoot in the Missouri wilderness has haunted me since the moment I first saw it online. The hunter who filmed it vanished from the internet shortly after posting, leaving behind more questions than answers. This is my attempt to piece together what happened, why this footage exists, and what it might mean for everyone who has ever wondered if Sasquatch is real. This is the footage I found online. I have no idea if real or not. And there are many more like this one. The shoulders are enormous, way wider than any linebacker I've ever seen. It looks heavy, you know, like real dead weight sinking into the dirt, not some stiff foam suit holding its own shape. The guy estimates 8 or 9 feet, and looking at how those massive arms are just flopped on the ground, I believe him. But it brings us back to the same old problem that drives me crazy. If this is a genuine body, where did it go? Did he run away and leave the discovery of the century to rot? Or is this another one of those bodies that supposedly just vanished before the experts could get there? The video is short, maybe 45 seconds at most. Whoever filmed it was breathing hard, like someone who just ran through thick brush or climbed over fallen logs. The camera shakes as it pans across the forest floor. And then there it is, the body, dark fur, matted and dirty, face down in the leaves, one arm stretched out to the side, the other tucked underneath. The cameraman mutters something about the size, about how this changes everything, and then the footage cuts out. I have watched this clip probably 300 times. Every time I see it, I notice something new. The way the fur moves slightly in the wind, the massive width of the back, the length of those arms. If this is a hoax, it is the most expensive and elaborate hoax I have ever seen. We are talking about a custom-made suit that would cost tens of thousands of dollars with realistic proportions that do not match any gorilla costume on the market. But if it is real, then why is this not front-page news? Why has no scientific team investigated the site? The video was originally posted on a hunting forum in late autumn a few years back. The username has since been deleted, the account scrubbed clean. I managed to save the clip before it disappeared, along with a few screenshots of the original post. According to the limited information available, the hunter claimed to have found the Bigfoot corpse while tracking deer in southern Missouri, somewhere in the Mark Twain National Forest. The post included rough GPS coordinates, but when other forum members tried to investigate, they found nothing. No body, no evidence, no signs of disturbance. What struck me about the original post was how matter-of-fact it was. The hunter did not claim to be a Bigfoot researcher or enthusiast. They just said they were out deer hunting, following a blood trail from an injured buck, when they came across this massive body in a ravine. They took a short video on their phone, posted it online to see if anyone knew what it was, and then apparently thought better of it. The whole account was deleted within 72 hours. That brief window of time is all we have. Everything else is speculation and digital archaeology. Let me be clear about something. I do not know if this footage is real. I want it to be real, but wanting something does not make it true. What bothers me most is not the footage itself, but the complete lack of follow-up. Think about it. If you stumbled across a dead Bigfoot in the woods, you would do one of two things. Either you would call every news station, university, and cryptozoology organization you could find, or you would keep quiet out of fear. This hunter chose the middle ground. Post the video online, then vanish. Why would someone do that? One theory is that the hunter got scared. Maybe law enforcement contacted them about disturbing evidence at a crime scene, or maybe they received threats from people who wanted the location kept secret. Another theory suggests the hunter realized they could make money from the footage and deleted everything to negotiate a sale. But if that were true, we would have heard about it by now. Documentary producers, streaming services, and tabloid shows would be fighting over exclusive rights. The most unsettling theory is that something happened to the hunter after filming. People disappear in national forests all the time. According to missing persons databases, hundreds of individuals vanish in wilderness areas every year without a trace. Search and rescue teams find empty campsites, abandoned vehicles, and personal belongings, but no bodies. Could the hunter have gone back to the site and run into something dangerous? Could there have been other Sasquatch in the area, protective of their fallen companion? I reached out to the moderators of the original forum where the video was posted. They confirmed that the account was deleted voluntarily, not banned or removed by administrators. The IP address traced back to somewhere in Missouri, but that information is not specific enough to be useful. No one saved the hunter's previous posts, so we have no way of knowing if they were an experienced outdoorsman or a casual weekend warrior. All we have is the footage and 100 unanswered questions. I even tried reaching out to internet sleuths and true crime enthusiasts who specialize in tracking down deleted accounts and lost content. A few of them took an interest in the case and spent time trying to trace the digital footprint, but they hit the same dead ends I did. Whoever posted that video knew how to cover their tracks or got very lucky when they deleted everything. There were no cached versions of the forum page with additional details. No other websites had archived the original post. It was as if the hunter and their account had been erased from existence. I grew up hunting in Missouri. My father taught me how to track deer through the hardwood forests, how to read animal signs in the dirt, and how to move quietly through dense underbrush. By the time I was 16, I had spent more nights camping in the woods than sleeping in my own bed. Missouri has some of the most beautiful and unforgiving wilderness in the country. The Mark Twain National Forest alone covers over 1 million acres of rugged terrain, deep hollows, limestone caves, and thick vegetation that can swallow you whole if you're not careful. During deer season, I would head out before dawn and stay until dark. The forest has a different personality in those early morning hours. Everything is quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of an owl. You learn to read the woods like a book, a broken branch here, fresh tracks there, the lingering scent of a buck that passed through hours earlier. I thought I knew everything there was to know about these forests. Then I started hearing the stories. Other hunters would mention strange experiences, hearing wood knocks echoing through the valleys at night, finding enormous footprints near their campsites, waking up to discover their gear had been rearranged or their food stolen by something that did not leave typical bear sign. Most people laugh these stories off as tall tales or blame them on black bears, but I started paying attention. Missouri has a long history of Sasquatch sightings dating back to Native American legends and pioneer accounts. The Osage and Missouri tribe spoke of large, hairy forest dwellers that avoided human contact but occasionally raided villages for food. I never saw a Bigfoot myself during all those years hunting in Missouri, but I did experience things I could not explain. One time, while camping alone in the national forest, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of something massive moving through my campsite. Not walking, but deliberately stepping over my gear without knocking anything over. I lay frozen in my sleeping bag, listening to these careful, heavy footsteps circling my tent. Whatever it was breathed slowly and deeply, like something assessing whether I was a threat. After what felt like an hour, the footsteps retreated back into the forest. In the morning, I found tracks in the soft mud near the creek. They were almost 18 inches long, with 5 distinct toes and a stride length that suggested something walking upright. I took pictures of those tracks, but my old flip phone camera was terrible, and the images came out blurry and unconvincing. When I showed them to other hunters back in town, they said it was probably just a black bear walking on its hind legs. But bears do not walk that way for extended distances, and their tracks look completely different. These prints had a distinctly human-like shape, just scaled up to an impossible size. I went back to the same campsite multiple times over the following years, hoping for another encounter, but nothing like that ever happened again. Another strange thing that happened to me was finding deer carcasses in unusual positions or locations. I would be tracking a wounded deer and find it not where it fell, but moved several hundred yards away and partially covered with branches and leaves. The first time it happened, I assumed another hunter had found the deer first and was coming back for it. But when I returned the next day, the carcass was still there, untouched by human hands. Wildlife cameras I set up near these sites sometimes captured strange things. Blurry figures at the edge of the frame, inexplicable movements in the darkness, and on one occasion, what looked like glowing eyes reflecting back at the camera from an impossible height. Over the years, I collected stories from other hunters and outdoorsmen who had their own unexplained encounters. One guy told me about finding a deer carcass hanging 15 feet up in a tree, the ribs cracked open and the internal organs removed with what looked like bare hands. No bear could have done that. Bears do not hang their kills in trees like that, and they certainly do not possess the manual dexterity to open a rib cage so cleanly. He took pictures, but by the time he got back to town and showed them to wildlife officials, they brushed him off as a hoaxer. He showed me the pictures later, and what struck me was not just the position of the deer, but the way it had been processed. Something had opened the chest cavity with precision, removed specific organs, and left others intact. It was not the messy, violent feeding pattern you see with predators. This looked almost surgical. The hunter told me he had been tracking that particular deer for 3 days, and when he finally got close, he heard heavy footsteps crashing through the brush ahead of him. By the time he reached the location, the deer was already in the tree, and whatever put it there was gone. Another hunter described setting up a trail camera near a natural salt lick, where deer frequently gathered. For weeks, the camera captured normal wildlife activity: deer, raccoons, the occasional coyote. Then one night, the camera recorded something standing upright at the edge of the frame, partially obscured by trees. It was there for maybe 3 seconds before moving out of view. The hunter enhanced the image as much as possible, but the figure remained frustratingly blurry. What was clear, however, was the massive size and the distinctly humanoid posture. The hunter went back to the location the next day and found the trail camera had been removed from the tree and placed carefully on the ground, lens facing down. What bothered him most was not that the camera had been moved, but how it had been moved. Trail cameras are designed to be difficult for bears and other animals to dislodge. They are strapped to trees with heavy-duty ratchet straps and positioned in ways that make them hard to reach without tools. Whatever moved this camera understood how the mounting system worked and deliberately repositioned it. That level of intelligence suggested something more than a curious animal. A bow hunter told me about an encounter he had while sitting in a tree stand during early season. He had been in position for maybe 2 hours, completely still and silent, when he heard something large moving through the brush below him. At first, he thought it was a big buck and slowly turned to look. What he saw was a massive, fur-covered figure walking upright through the trees about 50 yards away. It moved with purpose, not casually browsing like a deer, but walking with the determined gait of something that knew exactly where it was going. The hunter sat frozen, afraid to even breathe, until the Sasquatch disappeared into a thick patch of cedars. He climbed down from his tree stand as quietly as possible and left the area immediately. When he told his hunting buddies about it that night, they laughed and accused him of drinking too much coffee. But he swore off hunting in that particular section of forest after that day. He said there was something about seeing the Bigfoot in broad daylight, seeing how it moved and carried itself, that made him realize these were not dumb animals. They were aware, intelligent, and knew these woods far better than any human ever could. The story that affected me most came from an old-timer who had been hunting and trapping in Missouri for over 50 years. He was in his 70s when I met him, sharp as a tack, and not the type to make up stories for attention. He told me about an experience he had in his 30s while checking trap lines in the remote Ozark Hills. It was late winter, just after a heavy snowfall, and he was following a creek bed when he came across what looked like a massive disturbance in the snow. Trees had been pushed over, branches torn from trunks, and the snow was trampled and stained with blood. As he investigated further, he found the body of a black bear, its neck broken and its body showing signs of a violent struggle. But a few dozen yards away, he discovered something even more disturbing. Another large body lying in the snow, partially covered by fallen branches. It was a Sasquatch, dead. The old-timer described it in vivid detail, 9 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur, with hands the size of dinner plates, and a face that looked almost human but not quite. The Bigfoot had deep wounds across its chest and shoulders, and one arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. According to his account, it was clear that the Sasquatch and the bear had fought to the death. The bear must have defended its territory or maybe stumbled upon the Bigfoot at the wrong moment. The Sasquatch won the fight but was too injured to survive. The old-timer told me he stood there for probably 20 minutes, just staring at this impossible creature lying dead in the snow. He considered taking pictures but did not have a camera with him. He thought about marking the location and coming back with help, but something stopped him. Maybe it was respect for the creature, or maybe it was fear of what might happen if word got out. He left the bodies where they were and never went back to that location. When he returned to town, he told a few close friends about what he had seen, but most people dismissed it as a tall tale. Over the years, he kept the story quiet, only sharing it with people he thought might actually believe him. When I asked why he never reported it to scientists or wildlife officials, he shrugged and said, "Some things are better left alone. The woods have their secrets, and maybe we are not meant to know everything." That story stuck with me because it felt genuine. The old-timer had nothing to gain from lying, and his description matched other reported Bigfoot encounters I had read about. More importantly, it provided a possible explanation for what might have happened in the Missouri footage. Maybe the dead Sasquatch in the video died from injuries sustained in a fight with another animal. Maybe the hunter stumbled across the aftermath of some territorial dispute or a battle over food. If Bigfoot are real, they are still animals, and animals sometimes die from injuries, disease, or old age. I asked the old-timer if he thought other Sasquatch had come back for the body, if there was some kind of death ritual or burial practice. He said when he returned to the general area weeks later, he found signs that something large had been moving through the snow, but the bodies were gone. Not dragged away or torn apart by scavengers, just gone. The snow had been carefully smoothed over where the Sasquatch had been lying, as if someone had deliberately covered the site. He took that as a sign to never speak about it again, and he mostly kept his word until he told me. Missouri Bigfoot sightings go back centuries. Long before European settlers arrived, Native American tribes in the region told stories of large, hairy forest beings that lived in the deep woods and avoided human contact. The Osage people called them the Big Man or the Night Walker. These creatures were described as intelligent and mostly peaceful, but capable of great violence if provoked. Some tribes believed they were spirits or guardians of the forest, while others saw them as physical beings that had learned to survive alongside humans without being discovered. When European settlers moved into Missouri in the 1700s and 1800s, they brought their own stories of wild men and hairy giants. Pioneer journals and newspaper accounts from the era describe encounters with massive, ape-like creatures that walked upright and left tracks unlike anything else in the forest. In the early 1900s, these sightings became more frequent as logging operations pushed deeper into the wilderness. Workers reported hearing strange vocalizations at night, finding enormous footprints near their camps, and occasionally glimpsing large figures moving through the trees. One particularly interesting historical account comes from a logging camp near the Current River in 1909. Several workers reported seeing a large, hair-covered creature watching them from a ridge while they were felling trees. The foreman organized a search party to investigate, and they found tracks that were described as human-like but much larger than any man. The loggers also discovered what appeared to be a shelter made from woven branches and filled with deer bones. They abandoned the camp shortly after, claiming the area was cursed or inhabited by some kind of forest demon. The modern Bigfoot phenomenon took off in the 1960s and 1970s, thanks in part to the famous Patterson-Gimlin film from California. That footage, shot in 1967, remains the most analyzed piece of Bigfoot evidence in history. Experts have studied every frame, and while skeptics claim it is a man in a suit, no one has been able to definitively prove it is a hoax. The creature in that film moves with a fluidity and musculature that is difficult to replicate with costume technology from that era. Whether real or fake, it sparked a wave of interest in Sasquatch research that continues to this day. Missouri has its own share of famous Bigfoot encounters. The Momo sightings in Louisiana, Missouri during the early 1970s made national headlines. Witnesses described a large, hairy creature with glowing red eyes that terrorized a small town over several weeks. Children reported seeing the creature near the Mississippi River, and local residents found 3 toed tracks in the mud. Law enforcement took the reports seriously enough to organize search parties, but they never found definitive proof. The sightings eventually stopped, and Momo became a local legend. The Momo case is particularly interesting because it involved multiple independent witnesses, including children who had no reason to fabricate such stories. Police officers and civilians participated in organized searches, and the local newspaper documented the events as they unfolded. While no physical evidence was ever recovered, the consistency of the descriptions and the genuine fear in the community suggested something real was happening, even if that something defied easy explanation. More recently, documentaries and television shows have featured Missouri as a hotspot for Bigfoot activity. The dense forests, rugged terrain, and relatively low human population make it an ideal habitat for a large, elusive primate. Researchers have cataloged hundreds of sightings in the state, with clusters of reports coming from the Mark Twain National Forest, the Ozark Hills, and the remote river valleys in the southern part of the state. These reports describe creatures ranging from 7 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark brown or black fur, with broad shoulders and long arms. I have watched dozens of documentaries about Bigfoot, and several of them specifically focus on Missouri sightings. One show interviewed a family who claimed to have had multiple encounters with Sasquatch on their property over the course of several years. They described hearing vocalizations that sounded like a mix between a howl and a scream, finding massive footprints in their garden, and once seeing a large figure standing at the edge of their property line at dusk. The family seemed genuine and frightened, not attention-seeking or trying to profit from their story. Another documentary featured researchers using thermal imaging cameras and audio recording equipment in the Mark Twain National Forest. They captured some interesting footage: heat signatures moving through the trees at night, sounds that did not match any known animals, and one thermal image that appeared to show a large bipedal figure walking through dense brush. The researchers were careful not to claim definitive proof, but they argued the evidence warranted further scientific investigation. Skeptics argue that all Bigfoot sightings can be explained by misidentification, hoaxes, or vivid imaginations. They point out that no credible physical evidence has ever been produced. No bodies, no bones, no DNA samples that conclusively prove the existence of an unknown primate species in North America. The footprints can be faked, the vocalizations attributed to known animals, and the blurry photographs dismissed as pareidolia or deliberate fabrications. From a purely scientific standpoint, the skeptics have a strong case. Without a type specimen, Bigfoot remains in the realm of cryptozoology rather than legitimate zoology. But the believers counter that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. They argue that Bigfoot populations are small, highly intelligent, and have learned to avoid human contact over thousands of years. These creatures would know to stay away from roads, towns, and popular hiking trails. They would know to bury their dead or move injured companions deep into the wilderness where humans rarely venture. The vastness of North American forests provides plenty of space for an elusive species to remain hidden, especially if that species is actively avoiding detection. Some researchers point to the fact that new large mammal species are still being discovered in remote parts of the world. In the past few decades, scientists have documented previously unknown species of forest elephants, wild cattle, and primates in Southeast Asia and Africa. If large animals can remain hidden in those regions until modern times, why not in North America? The forests of the Pacific Northwest and the Ozarks are vast, rugged, and sparsely populated. A small population of intelligent, reclusive creatures could theoretically survive there without being definitively documented. Here is the frustrating thing about alleged Bigfoot corpses: they always disappear. Over the years, there have been dozens of reports of dead Sasquatch bodies being discovered in remote locations. Hunters claim to have stumbled across them. Hikers report seeing them from a distance, and occasionally someone posts a blurry photo online before vanishing into internet obscurity. But no one ever produces the actual body. No hunter has ever dragged a Bigfoot carcass out of the woods and presented it to scientists. No hiker has ever guided researchers back to the location for a proper investigation. The explanations for this pattern vary depending on who you ask. Skeptics say it is proof that these stories are hoaxes or misidentifications. If people really were finding dead Bigfoot bodies, at least one would have been recovered and studied by now. Believers offer more creative theories. Some say the creatures practice death rituals, carrying their dead to hidden burial sites or remote caves where humans will never find them. Others suggest that government agencies actively suppress Bigfoot evidence to avoid public panic or to protect logging and tourism industries. A few even claim that Bigfoot populations are so small and isolated that finding a dead one is astronomically rare. There's also the practical matter of decomposition. A large animal body can decompose surprisingly quickly in the right conditions. Scavengers, insects, bacteria, and weather can reduce a carcass to bones within weeks or months. If a Sasquatch dies in a remote area and no one finds it within that window, all physical evidence could be scattered or consumed before anyone has a chance to document it. This would explain why we do not find Bigfoot bones lying around in the forest, but it also makes the lack of recovered bodies more understandable from a biological perspective. The Missouri footage fits this frustrating pattern perfectly. Someone claims to have found a dead Bigfoot, posts evidence online, and then disappears before anyone can verify the claim. We are left with a tantalizing piece of footage that raises more questions than it answers. Is the body still out there in the forest, slowly decomposing into the soil? Did the hunter go back and move it to a different location? Did someone else find the body and keep it secret? Or was this entire thing an elaborate hoax designed to fool gullible believers like me? I have spent countless hours trying to track down information about the original poster. I combed through old forum archives, contacted other users who interacted with the account, and even hired a digital forensics expert to see if the footage had been manipulated. The expert confirmed that the video showed no obvious signs of editing or CGI tampering. Whatever the camera recorded was actually there in front of the lens, whether it was a real Bigfoot or a convincing prop. But that still leaves us with the central mystery. Where is the body now, and what happened to the person who filmed it? I also reached out to prop makers and special effects artists to get their opinion on whether the footage could show a fabricated creature. Most of them said that creating something that realistic would require significant resources and expertise. The proportions are wrong for a gorilla suit, the fur looks too natural to be synthetic, and the weight seems genuine based on how the body settles into the ground. One special effects artist told me that if this is a fake, someone spent at least $10,000 and weeks of work to create it. That level of investment for a short, poorly filmed video seems unlikely, but not impossible. This is the question that keeps me up at night. Who was the hunter who filmed this footage, and why did they vanish so completely? I have developed several theories over the years, each one more unsettling than the last. The first and most benign explanation is that the hunter simply got cold feet. Maybe they posted the video on impulse, realized it would bring unwanted attention, and decided to delete everything and move on with their life. People do impulsive things on the internet all the time, and regret is a powerful motivator for scrubbing your digital footprint. The second theory is that the hunter was threatened or intimidated into silence. Perhaps they were contacted by someone who did not want the footage made public. This could be a government agency worried about the implications of Bigfoot discovery, a private landowner who did not want their property overrun by curious investigators, or even another hunter who knew more about the situation than they let on. Threatening messages, legal warnings, or implied consequences could easily scare someone into deleting their account and staying quiet. I have heard stories about people receiving intimidating phone calls or visits after posting Bigfoot evidence online. Some claim to have been warned by men in suits who identified themselves as federal agents, though these accounts are impossible to verify. Others say they were threatened by local landowners who did not want their property associated with cryptid sightings. Whether these stories are true or just paranoid fantasies is hard to say, but they add to the overall sense that something strange is going on with Bigfoot evidence. The third theory is darker. What if the hunter went back to the site after posting the video and something happened to them? National forests are dangerous places, especially in remote areas where cell phone service is non-existent, and help can be hours or days away. The hunter could have gotten lost, injured, or encountered another wild animal. Or, if we want to entertain the more paranormal explanation, maybe they ran into other Sasquatch who were protective of their fallen companion. There are stories of Bigfoot becoming aggressive when humans approach their dead, treating the bodies with a reverence that suggests some level of awareness or mourning. I reached out to missing persons organizations in Missouri to see if anyone matching the rough profile of the hunter had been reported missing around the time the video was posted. Without a real name or specific location, it was nearly impossible to narrow down the search. Dozens of people go missing in Missouri wilderness areas every year, and not all of them make headlines. Some are eventually found alive, others are discovered deceased, and a few simply vanish without leaving any trace. Could the hunter be one of those unsolved cases? It is possible, but I have no way to prove it. The fourth theory is that the whole thing was a carefully planned hoax from the beginning. Maybe the hunter created a realistic Bigfoot prop, filmed it in a convincing outdoor setting, posted the video to generate buzz, and then deleted everything to leave people guessing. Hoaxers love the mystery and controversy that comes with unsolved cryptid footage. It keeps the discussion alive, ensures their work gets shared and analyzed, and strokes their ego knowing they fooled so many people. If this is a hoax, it is one of the best I have ever seen, but that does not mean it is impossible. There is also a fifth theory that combines elements of the others. Maybe the footage is real, but the hunter did not realize what they were getting into when they posted it. Maybe they thought people would be excited or helpful, but instead they were overwhelmed by skepticism, harassment, or unwanted attention. The internet can be a brutal place, and people who post extraordinary claims are often subjected to intense scrutiny and mockery. The hunter might have decided it was not worth the trouble and deleted everything to escape the drama. I made multiple trips to the Mark Twain National Forest using the rough GPS coordinates from the original post as a starting point. The area is vast and heavily forested with countless hollows, creek beds, and limestone outcroppings that all look similar. Finding one specific location based on a vague description and a few seconds of video footage is like searching for a needle in a haystack the size of a small state. I spent days hiking through the woods, looking for landmarks that match the video. A particular rock formation, a distinctive tree, anything that might confirm I was in the right area. I never found the exact location, but I did find other interesting things. Deep scratches on tree bark, 8 feet off the ground, that looked like they were made by something with large claws or fingernails. Footprints in soft creek mud that were much larger than any black bear track I'd ever seen. Rock cairns stacked in remote areas where no hiking trail existed, suggesting someone or something had deliberately placed them there. Were these signs of Bigfoot activity, or just the random detritus of a forest that sees thousands of visitors every year? I have no way of knowing for certain. During one of my expeditions, I brought along a wildlife biologist friend who specializes in large mammals. He agreed to help me search the area and evaluate any evidence we found. We spent 3 days hiking through remote sections of the national forest looking for signs of unusual animal activity. We found plenty of deer tracks, black bear sign, and evidence of coyotes, but nothing that definitively pointed to Sasquatch. However, my friend did admit that some of the markings we found were unusual. The tree scratches were at the wrong height for bears, and some of the footprints we discovered had proportions that did not match any known North American mammal. I also interviewed local residents who lived near the national forest. Some of them had their own stories about strange encounters, unexplained sounds, and objects going missing from their properties. One woman told me about hearing howls in the middle of the night that did not sound like coyotes or owls. Another man described finding enormous handprints on the windows of his cabin, pressed into the glass as if something had been looking inside while he slept. These accounts were similar to stories from other Bigfoot hotspots around the country, but they did not bring me any closer to finding the hunter or the alleged corpse. At one point, I considered hiring a private investigator to track down the original poster, but the cost was prohibitive, and the chances of success seemed low. Without a real name, without more specific location data, and without cooperation from the forum administrators, there was simply too little information to work with. I was chasing a ghost both figuratively and literally. The more I learned, the more elusive the truth became. Every lead seemed to evaporate the moment I got close to something substantial. I did manage to connect with other Bigfoot researchers who had investigated similar cases of vanishing evidence. They told me stories about finding promising leads only to have them disappear. Witnesses who suddenly stopped returning calls, landowners who refused access to their property after initially agreeing, physical evidence that mysteriously went missing before it could be analyzed. The pattern was frustratingly consistent, and it made me wonder if there was something more systematic going on, or if I was just falling victim to confirmation bias and seeing patterns where none existed. If the Missouri footage is real, the implications are staggering. It would mean that a large, unknown primate species has been living in North America for thousands of years, right under our noses, without being definitively documented by science. It would force us to reconsider everything we think we know about wildlife distribution, ecological niches, and the limits of human exploration. If Bigfoot can remain hidden in the forests of Missouri, what else might be out there that we have not yet discovered? The discovery would also raise ethical and legal questions. Would Sasquatch be protected under endangered species laws? Would they be considered intelligent enough to have rights, or would they simply be categorized as animals? What would happen to the forests they inhabit? Would logging and development be restricted to protect their habitat? Or would economic interests take precedence? These are not easy questions, and the lack of clear answers might explain why some people would prefer that Bigfoot remain a mystery rather than a confirmed reality. On a more personal level, the existence of Bigfoot would validate the experiences of thousands of people who have been dismissed as liars, attention seekers, or delusional. All those hunters who saw something in the woods and were laughed at by their friends. All those campers who heard strange sounds and were told it was just their imagination. All those rural residents who knew something was out there but could not prove it. They would finally have vindication and perhaps some closure. But if the footage is a hoax, it represents something darker, the willingness of people to deceive others for attention, entertainment, or profit. Hoaxes damage the credibility of legitimate researchers and make it harder for genuine evidence to be taken seriously. Every fake footprint, every fabricated photograph, and every staged video adds another layer of skepticism that real witnesses have to overcome. If this Missouri footage is a hoax, it is a particularly cruel one, because it gives hope to people who desperately want to believe, only to snatch it away when the truth comes out. The broader scientific community remains skeptical of Bigfoot claims, and for good reason. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and so far that evidence has not materialized. But I also think the scientific establishment could do a better job of taking witness reports seriously and investigating them with an open mind. Dismissing every sighting as a hoax or misidentification without proper investigation does a disservice to the witnesses and potentially prevents real discoveries from being made. After all the research, all the interviews, and all the time spent hiking through Missouri forests, I still do not have a definitive answer about the footage. Part of me wants to believe it is real. The proportions look right, the setting is convincing, and the abrupt disappearance of the hunter adds a layer of authenticity that is hard to fake. But the rational part of my brain keeps circling back to the same problem. Where is the body? Why has no one else found it? Why did the hunter vanish so completely? I think about the old-timer story of finding the dead Sasquatch in the snow and how he chose to leave it where it was. Maybe that is what happened here. Maybe the hunter filmed the body, realized they were witnessing something sacred or dangerous, and decided to walk away. Maybe they posted the video as a way of sharing the experience without fully committing to the chaos that would follow if they revealed the exact location. Or maybe they were scared of what might happen if they went back, scared of who or what might be waiting for them. The other possibility is that this is an elaborate hoax created by someone with the skills, resources, and motivation to fool people like me. If that is the case, I have to admit they did an excellent job. The footage is compelling enough to spark debate, vague enough to avoid easy debunking, and mysterious enough to keep people interested years after it was first posted. That might be the most frustrating outcome of all, not knowing whether I wasted years chasing a lie or came tantalizingly close to confirming something extraordinary. What do you think? Is this footage real, or is it another entry in the long history of Bigfoot hoaxes? Would you have reported the discovery if you found a dead Sasquatch in the woods, or would you have kept it secret like the old-timer? These are questions I cannot answer for anyone else. Everyone has to decide for themselves what they believe and what level of evidence would be enough to convince them. For me, the search continues. I will keep watching for new footage, keep collecting stories, and keep hoping that someday someone will find definitive proof that Bigfoot is real. Until then, the Missouri footage remains one of the most intriguing pieces of Bigfoot evidence I have ever encountered. It haunts me because it feels so close to being real, yet remains frustratingly beyond verification. Maybe that is the nature of Bigfoot itself, always just out of reach, always one step ahead, always leaving us with more questions than answers. The mystery is part of the appeal, but it's also maddening. I want resolution, but maybe resolution is not what this story is meant to provide. Maybe the point is the search itself, the journey into the unknown, and the willingness to believe that there are still wonders in this world that science has not yet explained. So I ask you again, what do you think? Watch the footage carefully, consider the evidence, and decide for yourself. Is this a genuine dead Bigfoot discovered in the Missouri wilderness, or is it another chapter in the ongoing mythology of Sasquatch? The answer matters, because if Bigfoot is real, then everything changes. And if it is not, then we have to ask ourselves why so many people are so desperate to believe in something that probably does not exist. Either way, the conversation is worth having, and the search is worth continuing. Because in the end, the hunt for Bigfoot is really a hunt for mystery, for wonder, and for the possibility that our world is stranger and more magical than we ever imagined. For more interesting stories, check this out.